Well, my friends, last week, I don't know if you remember, but I made a video about how Nvidia doesn't actually want you to buy an RTX 20 series card because they indeed just want to keep selling you 10 series cards. And I don't think we have any greater indication of that than the current launch that they have done under the silence of night, which is the new, brand new, fresh off the presses GTX 1060. Yes, you heard me again. Nvidia has released a new version of the GTX 1060. Now, before you hop off this channel because, you know, you think that we're prone to rumors and clickbait, Nvidia has actually released a brand new 10 series card. I'm not kidding. GTX 1060. And it's a super weird one that I can't even figure out why they're actually releasing this. So why are they releasing a new GTX 1060? How is it any different than the previous ones? Well, if we take a look at Nvidia's product page for the GTX 1060, we see that nothing has changed on the surface. They have it right here. It's going for $300, just like it always has, and they have a limit of 10 per customer. Not the 2 per customer that they had during the mining days, but they actually are trying to get rid of these things. Then if we take a look down here, you'll see where the actual difference comes in. We have the normal GTX 1063 gig that's always existed with less CUDA cores than the 1066 gig, but then you come down here to frame buffer and they show 6 gigabyte GDDR5X. They are releasing a 1060 with a better memory than both the 1070 and 1070 Ti. They're completely redoing the memory setup on the GTX 1060, probably to get rid of some GDDR5X overstock that they have, as well as to currently sell off some of their GTX 1060 stock. The weirdest part of this launch, however, is not the fact that just it's using GDDR5X, but rather the 1060 that they're releasing has a GP104 GPU core. And in case you're not familiar, GP104 is the exact same core that they use on the 1070, the 1070 Ti, and the 1080. So effectively, with this 1060 running on a GP104 core and having GDDR5X memory, it's a GTX 1080 that's scaled down to cost $300. The benefits that you would see from a card like this is that it's going to increase the memory speed from its 8 gigabits per second, which is what it was at launch. They upped it to 9 gigabits per second at the same time that they launched the 1080 Ti, and now we're going to see it at 10 gigabits per second for a total memory bandwidth of 240 gigabytes per second, which is close to the 1070 and 1070 Ti's memory amount, but it does have a lower bus interface at 192 bits. So it's not quite a 1070, it's not quite a 1080 downscaled because you're probably not going to be able to unlock any extra cores on this. This is just a really weird card with new memory that's not making a whole lot of heckin' sense. One of the other benefits that we might see from this, besides just the raw memory speed from 9 gigabits per second to 10 gigabits per second, is the fact that you can overclock GDDR5X a bit faster than you can GDDR5, so you're going to get greater memory speeds overall. How does this practically matter? I'm not exactly sure. So as far as we know, the only place that's currently selling these GDDR5X graphics cards for the 1060 is Nvidia's own website. The things that I've read say both in the US and in the EU. If you pick up a 1060 right now, it's going to be the GDDR5X variety. However, rumors of this card were around last week when it was found that Gigabyte was working with Nvidia to bring these cards. So we might start seeing these in AIB partner cards, such as like an MSI Gaming X or an Asus Strix or a Gigabyte WindForce. We might see these come out to new card manufacturers, so that means that we're going to have a lot more choices than we even expected. So them's the facts. We have a brand new GTX 1060 with GDDR5X memory. It's going to be faster, at least on the memory side of things. The core doesn't appear to have any difference between it and a 1060. What this is going to allow for is it's probably going to be better for 1440p gaming. If you are on the verge of being playable at 1440p, this higher memory speed and memory bandwidth might allow you to have actual playable frame rates at 1440p. Obviously, it would also help at 4K, but probably not to the extent that it's going to make it a good graphics card for 4K gaming. But certain games at 1440p, depending on the graphical settings, could definitely see a performance bump that makes it playable. And then also at 1080p with games that actually are very memory heavy, then you would also see a performance increase with this higher memory bandwidth and speed. So that's all that we know. That's what you can expect from this. Nvidia is not raising the price, which is great. They're not going to be charging us a surplus for this. So you're just getting more performance for the same price. Fantastic. However, let's get into the speculation side of it. This seems to be just like what we talked about last week, where Nvidia is still trying to sell out of the 10 series. They're so desperately overstocked with what looks to be 1080 and 1080 Ti cores that they need to clock them down to be a GTX 1060 in order to get rid of them at a rate that they possibly can, especially since it doesn't look like they even want to drop their prices. So instead of dropping prices, they're dropping cores, which can work if they have defective GPU 104 cores that will perform as a 1060 but can't quite compete as a 1070. That's totally fine. I understand the economics behind that. It's just interesting that they're doing this so late into the product cycle of the 1060, well after 2 years of it being out. They're releasing a brand new one, which hardly makes any sense to me. So how this ties in is that this could be a way where Nvidia is preparing for the rumored launch of the RX 590. So we have video cards putting out some information that Asus appears to be working on a Strix 590, not an Aries 590, which is about the GeForce Partner Program, if we remember that from earlier in the year. So it looks like we might be getting an RX 590 from AMD, which is supposed to be 10 to 15% faster than the RX 580, which would put it closer to a 1070 than a 1060. Nvidia then updating the GTX 1060 to have GDDR5X memory would then mean that it's more competitive in the price range that they're expecting the RX 590 to launch in. That's speculation. We're not exactly sure. I still haven't been able to get any good confirmation that AMD is launching a card anytime soon. The rumors that I've heard was that it was supposed to be like yesterday or like this past week that we were supposed to get the 590 coming out, 590/680. Then the newest rumors are saying that it's going to be sometime in November. All of the sources that I've talked to on my back end have indicated to me that they know nothing of this. However, that doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means that they're not. Nobody's expecting a new AMD card from my usual people who will give me information of this kind. So this is an interesting launch. It's not necessarily certain why Nvidia is doing this. They're giving us a faster 1060 for the same price. This likely means that the 2060, whether that's going to be an RTX card or a GTX card, is probably not coming anytime soon, especially if they're still refreshing their cards like this. But I mean, this kind of puts us into the place that I think I was talking about way back when the 10 series first launched, that this has been literally the strangest series that Nvidia has ever released. Not only has it been the longest running series, but they've launched more cards than I can even properly remember. So initially they launched the Titan, the 1080, and the 1070, with the 1060 following shortly after. Then there was the 1063 gig, which had less CUDA cores and less memory, so it wasn't really a 1060, it was more like a 1050 Ti, but then AMD or Nvidia actually released a 1050 and a 1050 Ti. The 1063 gig is, if that's the actual 1060, then the 6 gig is the 1060 Ti, but the 1066 gig can't be the 1060 Ti because it looks like this GDDR5X is actually a 1060 Ti. I mean, we made the joke back when the 1070 Ti was launching that we would call the 1066 gig a 1060 Ti. It looks like this GDDR5X one. That is more worthy of being called a 1060 Ti, and thus I will dub it that. So if I ever get my hands on one, it's going to be called the 1060 Ti. Anyways, so after they release the 1050 and 1050 Ti, well, then they go ahead and they release, that Titan X that they released back when the 1080 was around. Well, we're going to release a 1080 Ti that's faster just a few months later. After that 1080 Ti is released, well, guess what? A couple weeks later, we're just going to release a Titan XP, because the first one was Titan X Pascal. Now this one's Titan XP, and it's faster than that 1080 Ti that you just bought, but it's also $500 more. So that's the start of the craziness of just like those weird things that they launch. But then we had things such as the 1070 Ti come into play when nobody was really expecting it to come out. They released it so that they could compete better with Vega. Then we had things like the 1065 gig, which they released in China, which has worse memory bandwidth. It has a different memory bus. It's a completely different card, except for the fact that it appears to have the same GPU core as the 1060, but everything about the memory is even worse than the 1063 gig, which is super super weird. And then not only did they launch the 1065 gig, but just a few months ago, they launched the 1050 3GB, which had the same CUDA cores as the 1050 Ti, but it had a memory bus that was less than the 1052 gig, but it had a greater memory amount, but the memory bandwidth is smaller, and none of that makes any sense. And then if we look on the mobile side of things, they launched the 1080, 1070, and 1060 as mobile variants, 1050 and 1050 Ti as well. So they launched those as mobile variants, which is totally fine. They claimed that it was close to desktop performance, but then they go ahead and release Max-Q versions of the 10 series mobile graphics cards, which is a lower power one, better thermal, so that laptops can actually perform better with these high-powered graphics cards in them, which is totally fine, but that introduces a whole nother double set. But then they change it so that you don't have to disclose whether or not a laptop is Max-Q. If you get a 1070 laptop, it could be a 1070 Max-Q, and it's not the same thing. It's actually worse. If you have a Max-Q laptop, it's actually a worse laptop, but then the laptop manufacturers who were putting the actual full graphics cards in there changed it over to Max-Q, but then it didn't disclose that, and then their laptops are just all of a sudden worse. So this 10 series has been kind of crazy. And then not to mention the fact that the 20 series is already out. However, they're still selling the 10 series coinciding with one another. You can still get 10 series over on Nvidia's website, which is not typical for a normal launch. Typically, they would discontinue the cards that have been replaced with the 1080 Ti. We could say it's definitely been replaced by the 2080 Ti, but it's also definitely effectively replaced by the 2080, but yet you can still find it on sale brand new, which is just peculiar. I don't understand what Nvidia is getting at here. There's not a whole lot of reasoning behind it. There's no word on when these new 1060 6GB GDDR5X cards will actually be out on the open market besides Nvidia's store, but it'll likely be sometime soon. If we can get our hands on one, then we'll be sure to review it and let you guys know. But for right now, I'm left not understanding what Nvidia had done all of these years with the 10 series and where they're going. I think my video from last week where Nvidia doesn't want you to buy the 20 series is even more true now than it was back then, just because of this move. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Do you think buying a 1060 GDDR5X edition is something that you would want if you were considering buying a 1060 right now? You can answer the poll in the top right hand corner or leave a comment down below. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this 1060 new card for whatever reason they're doing this. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I will check you in the next video. My name is Brett with the UFD Tech channel. Yeah, love you too. Thank you so much for, see your smiling faces again in the next video. Love you too. Bye.